This is probably not the most popular subject when it comes to motorcycling, but for those who are interested, I'll try to be thorough. For those who are not interested, I'll try to be quick. Starting with a riding jacket, I bought this Olympia MotoQuest jacket, which I believe was a limited special release and isn't available anymore. It's got plenty of venting for those hot riding days. And it also has a water pouch and drinking tube, which I don't use. It came with a warm liner that also serves as a great destination jacket. And a rain over jacket, bright yellow of course, with a hood to keep the rain from dripping down your neck. Now I'm 5'11" and about 190 pounds, and I purchased the large, which was just about the right size in the gut, but the sleeves went almost down to my knees. So I returned the large and bought a medium, and the sleeves were just about right, but I could use a little more room in the gut, or maybe I could just use a little less gut. The next item is the Olympia riding pants, which I got for free because of a tiny smudge on the fuel tank of my bike when I bought it. I like the pants except for one thing. The rain and wind liner is worn under the riding pants. I'll discuss that in the changes section of the video. Next up, these tall Forma Adventure waterproof boots. They were very comfortable, offered a lot of protection, but didn't fit very well under my riding pants. I also had an issue with them leaking on those two very wet and cold days in British Columbia and Yukon territory, but I'm not quite convinced it was the fault of the boots. Now, gloves. On those two really cold days, I wore these heavily insulated Dainese riding gloves. They were soaking wet inside both days. But to be fair, I was stopping probably 20 to 25 times per day, changing batteries and adjusting my cameras, taking the gloves off and putting them back on in the pouring rain each time I stopped. I wore these leather Icon gloves for a couple of days, which provided lots of protection, but they gave me a terrible blister on the palm of my right hand after just a few hours of riding. 90% of the trip I wore these super light Fox riding gloves because they were so comfortable and they made it really easy to push the buttons on my cameras, but they provided absolutely no protection. Finally, I bought this Nolan N104 modular helmet about 10 years ago. I'm very happy with it. I also purchased the NCOM communicator, which is specific to the helmet, but it became quite outdated really fast. For the changes, I'll start with the single most thing that caused me problems on the trip. The seat. It had a huge effect on the number of miles I could ride each day. There were many times each day where the discomfort was so bad, I found myself having to switch positions on the seat every few minutes. Shortly after returning from Alaska, I sent the seat to Aztec Custom Motorcycle Seats in Indiana, where they customized my seat with various layers of memory foam and gel based on my weight. As far as I can tell so far, after a few 1,500-mile rides, it's an improvement. But another 7,000-mile ride to Alaska and back will be the true test. But I do have a backup just in case. I bought an Airhawk seat pad, which I used on the Norway trip, and it helped me tolerate some of those 500-mile-plus riding days Kevin and I had in 2017. When I purchased my bike, it came with a tall windscreen mounted on the bike, and they also gave me a shorter one. I chose to install the shorter one before the Alaska trip, figuring it would be less interference for the POV camera shots, provided I can remember to keep the windscreen adjusted at the lower setting, and I don't have any issues with wind buffeting. I bought the Sena communication system, which works fantastic except for one thing: it's not waterproof. Mine failed in those heavy storms on the North Cape trip. Luckily I had a backup, and Sena did replace the burned out one for free. It's such a hassle having to put on rain liners on the road when you're surprised by a rainstorm. Olympia Horizon overpants? Problem solved. In 2017, I finally broke down and purchased the GV Outback Trekker 42-liter top case, which required purchasing the SW Motec adapter plate, which also has the handy quarter-turn clips. To make use of that dead space inside the lid of the case, I added a few strips of heavy-duty Velcro and purchased some Velcro back pouches so I can store a wide variety of items such as camera batteries, power banks, etc. I also applied some Tech Spec snakeskin to the top of this case. Instead of the 2-gallon Rotopacks, which was a hassle to unpack and refill when needed, I bought 2 1-gallon Rotopacks fuel containers and mounted them on each side of the top case, making them much easier to access and refill if necessary. The side pockets on the Rainier tank bag are kind of small. Wolfman makes larger ones, so I bought a set. Who doesn't want more room to throw more junk into their tank bag? I bought an iPhone 11 Pro and plan on using it as my primary still camera. Since the phone is relatively water resistant, I bought this Ram X-Grip phone mount. In place of the full-length Forma boots I wore on the trip, I bought these mid-height Revit Scout H2O boots. They're waterproof, have good protection, and they fit much better under my riding pants. Last winter I purchased the Olympia North Bay 12-volt heated jacket liner, which plugs directly into the bike's power source. Now, going back to the subject of operator error, we need to step back to my May of 2019 Yellowstone trip, where the temperature was 33 degrees and I was freezing. How's it going? Good, thanks. It's cold. I decided to put on my brand new heated jacket liner that I tested twice before I left on this trip. It didn't work. Back at home, about 3 weeks later, after checking all the wiring, the fuse, and the connections to the jacket, I made this discovery. So you have to press and hold the button for 3 seconds in order for it to turn on. What an idiot. The result was an unnecessary cold ride from Wyoming back to Denver. No shocking revelations here. I planned the most direct route from Denver. Marking all the places I stayed overnight on the map, I rode into Sheridan, Wyoming, Great Falls, Montana, crossing into Canada through Sweetgrass, Montana, passing through Calgary, and staying in Olds, Alberta, then Grande Prairie, Alberta. Shortly after Grande Prairie, I passed through Dawson Creek, British Columbia. That's where the Alaska Highway starts, and that's where the terrain and the scenery really starts to get interesting. Then I rode into Fort Nelson, British Columbia, then Watson Lake, Whitehorse, and Beaver Creek, Yukon Territory, crossing the border into Alaska, which is about 20 miles past Beaver Creek. Then I rode on to Fairbanks, where I came to the realization that after being 3 to 4 days behind schedule, this was not going to be the trip where I would make it to Prudhoe Bay, as that would add another 3, maybe 4 days to my trip. From Fairbanks, I rode north to the Arctic Circle sign, made my U-turn, then stayed at Yukon River Camp, which looking back on it was completely unnecessary. I could have easily made it back to Fairbanks that evening and saved myself a night and about $250. But it was fun, so I'm not going to lose sleep over it. Just money. Continuing south, I rode back into Fairbanks, then on to Tok, where in my original plans I was going to ride the top of the World Highway, but changed those plans because of my tight schedule, and that area received an insane amount of rain that evening. I was told by the locals it's not a good idea to take that road after heavy rainfall like that, especially alone. From Tok, I continued south back into Whitehorse, Watson Lake, on to Fort Nelson, and returning to Grande Prairie. From Grande Prairie, I detoured away from the route I took north into Jasper to ride through Banff and Jasper National Parks. If you're anywhere near that area and have never been there before, it's an absolute must. It's home to some of the most spectacular, breathtaking mountains in the world. From Banff and Jasper, I rode into Calgary, passing back into the U.S. at Sweetgrass again, into Conrad, Montana, Sheridan, Wyoming, then back home. Wrapping things up in part 3, I'll conclude the planning, including road conditions, fuel stops, weather, motels, and a few additional notes. And I'll cover some information about my camera setup.